Welcome back to the Magical Arts Hour. Again, my name is Baldini. Well, today we have guest number 2, and it's a very special guest, especially because today is Remembrance Day. His name is Gordon Precious. He's 87 years young, and I mean young. I think he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with his grandson in the last year or so, which is truly magical. And he is also a member of the Royal Canadian Air Force and fought in the war back in the 40s, I believe it was. I should do my homework. But I tell you what, we're going to introduce him, and I'd like for him to start with an effect. This is a classic effect in magic. For anyone who saw the movie The Prestige, it's the opening effect that they do. And without further ado, please give a big round of applause. Welcome to our show, and to perform his first effect, Mr. Gordon Precious.
Thank you, Baldini. I'd like to introduce my friend Houdini, the name of my canary. And I call him Houdini because he's able to escape from this cage and disappear right before your eyes.
I don't believe
It's possibly the world's fastest trick. Are you watching? 1, 2, 3. Oh, he took the cage with him that time.
That's why he's a master. That's Gordon Precious. You can have a seat here, buddy. That was absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, I think one of the they're all going in the audience here. Wow, that's better than anything I've ever seen Baldini do. It's got a few years on me, folks, but I'm trying to learn what I can from him. We met, I'm thinking that 4-year anniversary of Friday Night Magic, or 7-year anniversary, and you performed that effect that night.
Oh,
and
yes.
It was a packed house, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I do. You did it once, the crowd went nuts, and everyone was yelling, "Do it again! Do it again!" Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
I remember it. And you came out and did it again, and the crowd just went absolutely nuts. Absolute pleasure to have you here. A little bit of background, by the way, on Gordon. He's born and raised in the Hamilton area.
Correct.
Go Steelers. Adam Sway, who we both know very well, and there's actually a connection. My mother knows his father.
Oh, really? So do I know his father.
I think they
very
actually
well.
Did you date?
That's how I got to know Adam.
You dated Adam Sway's dad. Look at that. Isn't that weird and awkward?
Great guy, Jerry.
Well, thank God you married my dad. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now, probably. Anyway, nor would Adam. You are the founding member of, and by the way, Adam is watching as well. I called
really?
him because I know,
great.
because Adam,
Hi,
I believe you were a mentor to Adam Sway. Is that true?
Well, I'd like to think I helped in some way.
You're
He's a
humble.
I really admire Adam and his skills.
Yeah.
And entertainment ability. Yeah.
So just back to a little bit more about Gordon. He's a founding member of the IBM Ring number 49, correct?
In
IBM,
Hamilton.
by the way, stands for International Brotherhood of Magicians. Its charter year was 1947, and Gordon was, as I said, a founding member. As I also mentioned, he is a member of the Royal Canadian Air Force, so happy Remembrance today. See, he didn't wear the poppy, and he said, "It's okay, I was there. I don't have to remember," right? So, but you told me, what did you do? What was your role in the Air Force? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I started out training as a pilot, and as I was saying to you earlier, I can't get over the fact that I actually started with biplanes, the de Havilland Tiger Moth.
I think we have an image, and we'll throw it up, and then if you can throw that up, there it is. Is that the plane you flew? Something like it?
Yes, that's very.
Something
that's
like that.
It. That's
Is that you in the cockpit?
They were very difficult to land because they were so light. They were like a kite, and you'd come down, and if you hadn't really stalled it, you'd be bouncing down, and it wanted to take off again. Amazing plane.
And so you actually went into battle, like
No,
battle, or
no, I didn't get that far. Actually,
so what was your role then?
Well, I started out training as a pilot, and but the war, as it progressed, the Allies went from fighter planes defending Britain to bombers, and so I had to retrain as a flight engineer. And I graduated as a flight engineer and became a commissioned officer, a pilot officer, and then I guess Hitler got word of it and decided to surrender.
Yeah.
And so I actually did not fight overseas. I simply completed my training and
But you told me a cute story when we were having the pre-interview about how in the beginning something to the effect like it was so new and you would just wave at each other even though they
Oh, yes.
Recount
Well, that was
story.
back in
Can you recount that story?
Well, that's back in the World War I when planes were first used. And, of course, in those days, they used them just for reconnaissance. And the Allied planes would fly over the trenches of the Germans and sort of wave down at them. They had no anti-aircraft guns to shoot them with, and they'd come back. And then they would encounter German planes flying over their lines. And in those days, the pilots had a great camaraderie. They had something in common that they loved, which was flying. And so they would wave to each other, and then somebody got the idea of installing a gun on the plane, and that changed it from waving to
shooting.
Yeah.
Great story. Now, before we leave the Remembrance Day theme here and the war talk, so to speak, what was your memory of aside from your personal involvement, but what was the population of Canada thinking about the war? Because today, let me preface that today, with Iraq and all the things that are going on, Canada plays a somewhat limited role, and it doesn't seem like we have a whole lot of protests going on, but at the time, Canada was like fully involved in the war, correct? So what was the prevailing mentality, or your memories of the prevailing mentality of Canadians in general during wartime?
Well, of course, we had an easy person to hate, Adolf Hitler, and everybody was united in their wanting to dethrone him from power. And so there was conscription in Canada, but many of us volunteered to join the Air Force, the Navy, or the Army, and it was very much a united
So there wasn't
effort.
a whole lot of backlash like you see today. I mean, there's
No.
really two camps.
No.
We should have invaded, we shouldn't have invaded. Canada shouldn't align with the States.
There was no question then.
Yeah,
That's right.
Very well. I mean, Hitler was just
Yeah.
so obvious that there is no.
Exactly.
It's not is he hiding or is he not hiding. He's definitely a bad guy. He's killing people and
Right.
telling people about it. So, well, on behalf of Canada, I want to thank you, and I'm not saying this in any kind of tongue-in-cheek way. It's guys like you that gave people like us our freedom here, and I think that alone deserves a round of applause from our studio audience, and we're grateful. We really are, Gordon.
Thank you.
So now back to magic, the fun stuff.
By the
Oh,
way,
sorry.
a thought came to my mind. The advertising for Air Force at that time was join the Royal Canadian Air Force and become a world traveler.
Yeah.
And I was
See the
19
world.
when I joined. I didn't see a lot of the world at that time, but it inspired me to do so after the war.
And I mean, I think in the movie Stripes, there's which is Bill Murray, and way back in the day, it's like join the army, travel the world for free, and kill people. That's what there's a takeoff on that. But so let's talk about magic. I mean, gosh, 87. You said I believe you started when you were 7 years old. That, with my limited math, puts you at 80 years in the business
Of being in love with it as a hobby and sometimes as a profession.
Yeah.
It was an uncle, brother of my father, who lived in Toronto, and when he and his wife would come over to visit us, he would always go. There was called the Arcade Magic Shop on Yonge
And
Street.
Arcade Magic and Novelty?
Yes, in the arcade, and he would pick up simple tricks and puzzles and jokes and bring them over. And
you were how old at this time?
I was 7. Wow. And I remember one that, as you were saying, once in a while we can expose something.
Yeah.
It was called the plate lifter. And what it was, Uncle Harry brought me this device. It was a rubber balloon that was flat and a rubber tubing, and at the other end a bulb. Mm-hmm. And we ran it under the tablecloth and put this balloon, flat balloon, under my mother's plate where she would be sitting at dinner. And then Uncle Harry and I were at the other end of the table, and when Mother sat down, he or I would squeeze this, and it would cause the balloon to inflate, and the plate would jump up and down.
Priceless. Should be a MasterCard commercial. That was priceless. Okay. Although shouldn't be saying the competitor's brand name. It's a little inside family joke. That's amazing. So you're 7 years old. You get into magic, and then at what point did it like? When was your first paid gig? You know, like in your teens or
16. Yeah,
16?
I remember it well for a local chapter or
branch,
whatever it's called. Yeah, branch of the Masonic Lodge. And but just going back a bit, from these puzzles and tricks that my uncle would bring over, I then went to the library, and in the juvenile section read all of the books that they had there on magic, and when I completed them, the librarian was duly impressed, and she allowed me to go into the adult section. And it was a separate locked-in section that you had to sign in, and that's where they kept the books on magic and sex. I remember they were always...
Yeah. What's that?
You had to, yeah, that's right. You had to sign in.
I'll tell you what sex is. It's magic. It's a little awkward with my parents in the room,
so
but...
I then read all the books, and the greatest one that had the greatest effect on me was... and you would certainly know it, Jean Hugard's Modern Magic. It was called Modern, written back
I think I own
in
it. I believe it or not, I own it. I do own
written
it.
back at the turn of the previous century.
With very little diagrams and a lot of small words and describing the effects more than diagrams?
Well,
if I remember
fortunately,
correctly.
diagrams too.
Oh, there were? Okay, so maybe I'm thinking of a more modern version of modern-day magic, yeah.
And I remember at school in crafts making something... it was called the appearing cannonball, and actually it was about the size of a old-fashioned cannonball, but it was actually made of wood that was hollowed out, and so you had all kinds of things like silk handkerchiefs and paper streamers.
You're giving away more secrets, Gordon!
Right.
Which is... Sorry, carry on.
And it had a hole that your finger could go into, and you remember back in the old days we had tables with what we called servants. It was a shelf behind the table that you would produce things that the audience didn't see.
Interestingly enough, our Crossfire in the Cauldron is about what we should reveal and not reveal, and I'm getting a sense of what you would like to reveal because you're giving about. But you're also excuse me, of the belief that there are certain tricks you just do not reveal. Like, for example, that birdcage thing, you're not going to... I don't even know how you do it, let alone the people in here. So that's not one you would give up. And that's going to lead...
Not readily. I would to a magician who is showing me that he is sincerely interested and is practicing and trying to get ahead, then I'm glad to be a tutor to anyone like that.
So just to wrap it up on what pulled you into magic, and I think it's the same for myself and for Alex, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, at least in my case, is I didn't make a choice. I started, first of all, when I was 34, and I went to the magic store once and just to buy a few tricks to have on my sales calls and marketing, and then I just kept getting pulled back, much like you got pulled back to the next book and the next book and the next book. Would you say that magic found you versus you finding magic? Is that a fair statement?
I haven't thought of that particular question, but as I say, it certainly was my uncle bringing me simple tricks, and then
right. I mean, that was that was the igniter, but then it became.
And you know, as I read these books, and there were the allied arts such as hypnotism and ventriloquism and so on. I must say that initially I was hoping to find real magic. And really all my life I have looked for real magic. And I don't look with too much zest today. I don't believe there is such a thing. But I certainly, when I was traveling in India and meeting gurus and fakirs, they would say, "Oh, you should have been here last week. There was fantastic real magic where this man took some earth, put it in his hand, held it there, did some incantations, opened his hand, and a live bird flew out. And but it was always last week. I was.
Well, this is a great segue into the next question, which is, where in the world has magic taken you? Because I believe, again, in our little conversation before the show, you said there was a period of time for about two and a half years where you traveled, I don't know about the world, but Europe, and fully supported the trip by performing. Tell us about that.
3.5 years. I had told my parents that I would be gone for not less than 6 months and not more than 2 years. I'd been doing a lot of reading of where I wanted to go and see, such as the pyramids of Egypt, and to stay with the Bedouins on the desert in the Middle East and see the Taj Mahal and so on. Well, I am rather slow at everything I do. I
find that hard to believe. I really
and so
do.
it took me, instead of 6 months to 2 years, it took me 3.5 years to go around the world.
Right.
And I was able to pay for the whole latter part of the travels for about 1.5 years by performing magic in India,
That's
Vietnam, in Japan, and I stopped for a whole year to teach English in Lebanon, and it was there while practicing a sport, the last one you would expect, probably in Lebanon. I met my wife skiing there.
That's a great.
And,
See, there, you said you've been looking for real magic your whole life.
There
Is
you
that
go.
not real magic?
That's right.
Yeah, you can clap for that. Absolutely.
And so
Brilliant. That's just brilliant.
Jeanne and I were married in Beirut, and she's French, but was teaching in a French college in Beirut, and that was
That's
1951.
awesome.
And from there, my idea was to travel by land on the motorcycle to India. But
As opposed to a unicycle. So
Yes,
this is how-
that's
This is how
right.
magic has changed in 70
There
years.
you go.
But yes.
And but Jeanne always wanted to visit Africa, and I didn't think we could go far in Africa on a motorcycle, but we sold the little one that I had ridden from England out to Beirut and bought a bigger one, an ex-British Army matchless made in England, and we rode that from the beginning of the Nile, the mouth of the Nile, Alexandria, Egypt, right down to Cape Town,
My gosh.
20,000 kilometers or 12,000 miles in those days, and 7 months we were taking our time.
That's
and that
why,
was when I climbed Kilimanjaro. We climbed it.
How old were you then?
24.
Oh, 24. But didn't you recently climb somewhere with your grandson?
Well, we went skiing together
Okay, skiing.
in
So I'm mixing the two stories up. But yeah, tell us a little bit
in
about
Iran, just because my grandson, who graduated from Yale in the States, was imbued with the belief that all the people of the Middle East hated us North Americans. And I said, no way. Hospitality has been a tradition throughout the Middle East for centuries, probably millennia. And so we always have a ski trip together every year. And I said, what do you say we go to Iran and see for ourselves, which we did, and we were extremely...
Were they hospitable?
Yes, and we visited the country while we were there, went to Isfahan and Shiraz, and of course Tehran.
And you got to say...
Without exception, the people were extremely kind and hospitable.
Yeah, and so you got to say, I told you so, grandson, right? There you go. I'll tell you what we're going to do. I mean, I could talk to you for days, and we're doing lunch next week, and hopefully Kazam will join us as well.
Great.
I can't even imagine the things you've amassed over 70 years or 80 years of magic in your house. I just absolutely can't wait to come by and do that. And
Great.
We're going to do it. And then we'll let you take us out to lunch after, because you said only if you let me take you out to lunch. So what we're going to do, I think, is it okay? I'll just check with the producer here. Can we do an effect? Can we have him do another effect, a quick one? And then what we'll do is we'll go to break after the effect, and then what we'll do is we'll have Alex Kazam come back on, and we'll plop his little butt down here, and between these two we'll have 68 years spanning of magic knowledge, the 19-year-old and the 87-year-old, and we'll throw them into the, what did I call it, Kazam?
The cauldron.
Yeah, but I had a name for it. What was it? The what? Yes, thank you. That's why Alex Kazam's helping me produce. The Crossfire in the cauldron, which is, a little bit more tete-a-tete, but, we'll get into some of the stuff that you were touching on with what one should reveal, what one shouldn't reveal, approaches to magic back then and today, and so on and so on. But without further ado, folks, it's time for Mr. Gordon Precious to do another one of his magical effects. All right? So let's give it up for him one more time.
Thank you. This is probably by...
This camera here? I just want to make sure they got you on the right camera so they see
probably
it.
my favorite magical effect. It's my wife Jeanne's favorite effect, and you'll see why. When we travel, and we've done a lot of traveling, instead of taking money, when you always are subject to being mugged if you're carrying a wad of money, and instead of traveler's checks, we clippings from travel magazines.
Yeah.
And we clip them the size of the local currency. Here I've got 5 of them, of these clippings, I believe. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you can
see
see what you can see in the camera. You're good. Yeah,
3,
because this camera's in on you tight. So
4, and 5. Now, I square them up like this, and let's say we're far away from home, and no fear of being mugged, because all the mugger would get would be clippings. But by waving my hand, and watch that nothing goes up or down my sleeve, and a blow like that, and a little rotation, we find that the clippings change into negotiable Canadian
$40,
currency.
$80, $100. Can I see one bill? Maybe just feel one bill.
Oh, certainly. Well, yes.
Just one bill. Yeah. That's real money, folks. Real money. There you go.
And as a matter,
are you giving this me to keep, or what's the deal?
Well, no, I'll take it back.
Well, here you go, Gordon.
And you know,
now I can
may I just finish that
yes,
effect?
Please.
The trouble is with the $100, and if you're away from home, it's still dangerous if one were mugged. So I'm able to change it back to the clippings. So I'd just like to do that for you.
See that.
And so here we have the 5 20s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
And I square them up, and now they will change back to the clippings. Oh, I hate it when they've changed into $100 bills, which is even more.
I love you, man. I got to hang out with you more often. One more time for Gordon Precious. That was unbelievable, folks. Sit down. You're not going anywhere yet. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little break here, and we will come back very shortly. Don't go anywhere. And we're going to have a little crossfire in the cauldron with Alice Kazam and Gordon Precious, spanning 68 years of magic. Alex Kazam. Alex Kazam. We just call him Kazam.